It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. The bad weather continues to wreak havoc across swathes of the country, with hundreds of flood alerts and warnings still in place this evening. Dozens of people have been rescued in Leicestershire after heavy rainfall and snowmelt, engulfing homes and businesses. And there's more rain, sleet and snow on the way. Tonight, we'll bring you the latest. Also ahead, the government announces a crackdown on sexually explicit deepfake images. Does it go far enough? We'll hear from the influencer and activist Sarah-Jane Mee about her experience and why the time for action is now. Plus, the search for two British hikers missing in Italy. Aziz Ziriat and Sam Harris haven't been heard from since New Year's Day. We'll be joined by Aziz's sister. And the humpback whales putting on a show along the south coast. We'll find out why sightings like this are becoming more frequent. All that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, there really has been no let-up in the severe weather today, with widespread flooding causing major disruption across central England. In Leicestershire, homes and businesses have been submerged in floodwater after the River Soar burst its banks. In just a moment, we'll take you live to Quorn, one of the villages worst affected. But first, we can take a look at the state of play around the country this evening. There are almost 300 flood warnings and alerts across England and Wales tonight, varying in severity. In Leicestershire, there was a danger to life flood warning, but this has now been downgraded. A critical incident has been declared by East Midlands Ambulance Service for the first time ever. The announcement coming as a result of significant patient demand, pressure within local hospitals and flooding right across the East Midlands. Snow and flooding has also caused problems for commuters on major A roads, with high water levels leading to road closures. Major airports were forced to close temporarily or pause flights. Although they have now reopened, thousands of passengers were diverted and may still be experiencing delays. And it's not over yet. The Met Office has issued new weather warnings for ice across northern England and Wales. Yellow snow and ice warnings are also in place across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight and into tomorrow. Well, let's speak to Matthew Thompson now, who's in Quorn in Leicestershire for us tonight. Put us in the picture there, Matthew.
Well, look, we're here in Cornwall, as you say, one of the worst affected villages in Leicestershire in the flooding over the last 24 hours or so. Happily, the floodwaters have been receding really for the last few hours since we've been here. They've dropped by probably a foot or two at least since we arrived. But and also you mentioned that severe flood warning that was in place, the risk to life warning, that has been downgraded. But 8 flood warnings remain for this stretch of the River Soar alone, and that's not to mention the 300 or so that are still in place across England and Wales. And then even if the immediate danger is passing, there's the problems of the clean-up. And also we speak to residents and business owners here. Their real fear is the regularity of the flooding now in this village of Quorn. It's the second time in as many years that it's flooded at vast expense. And frankly, locals here shudder at the thought that this may be the new normal. And then, as the threat from floodwaters recedes, you're right to point out the risk from snow and ice hoves into view, those yellow weather warnings in place right across the country, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Yorkshire and Humber, the East and West Midlands and the northwest of England, all likely to be affected. And of course, it's snow that's, at least melting snow at least, that's partly responsible for some of the flooding that we have seen over the last day or two. So I think it's fair to say that with the weather still looking, well, dangerous in parts and unsettled to say the very least, we're far from out of the clear.
Matthew, thank you. Matthew Thompson in Leicestershire for us tonight. Well, our North of England correspondent, Katerina Vertozzi, has a report on the bad weather for you now.
Battered by rain and now by floods. The bad weather here feels unrelenting. Here in Lincolnshire, rescue teams have had call-out after call-out to reach the stuck and stranded.
Recovery services themselves, they can't cope. We went out to a chap yesterday and he'd been waiting for 11 hours for a recovery. And of course, at that point, it was also getting to a point it could have been a medical problem as well because it was so cold.
This is what the floods have done to Terry's house.
The fire brigade was here, asking us to want to be evacuated, but we decided to stay.
It's cold, wet, and now unlivable.
Devastated. Everything's gone.
In Leicestershire, authorities issued a threat to life warning, evacuating people here as floodwater quickly rose.
It's almost a year exactly to the day when these businesses behind me were flooded, and yet again they've had a night of trying to save stock and merchandise and lift it to higher ground, and a day today of counting the cost of what they've lost.
At this restaurant, they're waiting for the water to recede before they start yet another clean-up.
So hopefully when we get the alert we'll find out if it's still rising. We can hope that the water decides to not rise anymore. But yeah, that would be...
We're all getting these flood alerts, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
We've just been interrupted by that flood alert. I mean, how much warning did you get?
So we got a warning first thing this morning. That was the first alert that we actually got. Obviously, it was already rising levels last night and yesterday. Obviously, we got a weather alert regarding snow, but there was nothing regarding flooding until it was already pretty much on the path to being flooded.
Workers at this pub turned up for a staff party last night. It turned into a salvage mission.
Hopefully it can't get any worse, but we said that about 9 o'clock last night, it can't get worse, and it has. It's people's jobs, people can't go to work, we obviously won't be open today, or for, I'd have thought the next week or so, I don't know. I came in cream chinos for the staff party, and now I'm in shorts and wellies, so there's a slight change of plan.
Flood alerts remain across the East Midlands. Here, they're just hoping for a few drier days. Catherine Overtotsi, Sky News, Leicestershire.
Well, let's speak to a local business owner now, Troy Stevens. His offices have been severely flooded. Troy, talk to us about the picture that you faced arriving at work.
Well, as you can see, I came from this village, about 15 miles up the road to Thurmaston, 15 minutes up the road to Thurmaston, and it looked like a river was coming down the road, entering our office, and we were almost knee-high in some rooms. It was very surreal, out of the frying pan into the fire, and, yeah, not what I expected to come back to after the Christmas break on a Monday morning.
Like you said, you're just down the road. Like you said, you're just down the road in Thurmaston. Were you affected there? Because obviously you'll have been aware of the weather warnings, you'll have seen it on the news channels. You know, it's so different just a few streets away.
Well, here in Quorn, of course, we had this exact same thing almost a year ago today. But up the road in Thurmaston, we just didn't see it coming. I knew something was awry when, on my way to work, I got about 20 missed calls from staff members. But when we got there, just nothing could have prepared us for what we saw, and we were completely unawares. I think in theory we knew there was a flood risk kind of at any time, but in the 10 years plus since we've been in that office, we'd never seen anything like it.
Was there any guidance or any early warnings for you? Because, you know, we've been speaking to people whose homes and businesses have been affected, and, you know, we tend to hear this time and time again on Sky News when flooding happens in the UK. People feel let down by their local authorities. Has that been the case for you?
Well, we certainly weren't aware. It's easy to play the blame game. However, you'd like to think that if this was to have happened the year before, which it did do, there would be some form of investigation with a look for prevention. Hopefully that can happen this time. As for kind of blaming local authorities or local councils, I'd like to see if they could do more following this incident as opposed to kind of looking backwards.
I mean, what do you do now, Troy? I mean, we're just looking at these aerial pictures of the surrounding area where you are in Leicestershire. And, you know, you just look at it and think, how can you even begin to start to recover? Because the water is still so high. As I said, there are alerts still in place across the country, more of this weather to come. What do you do from this point on? Where do you start?
Well, I've been pushing for a drawbridge for a long time in my office. No, I jest. I think that all we can do is kind of clear up the mess that has been left by this. I heard you speaking earlier, and I think the worst is to come with the silt and the sludge, ice and snow, kind of clawing through, you know, in our case, our office and people's homes, and as you can see around me, businesses. And I think all we can do is kind of make the best of what we can do right now, and then look to the future. This time next year, no one wants to be in this exact same position.
Yeah, it does tend to be a cycle, doesn't it? Areas that get flooded, that experience it again, say, you know, we know what happens, we know what mistakes are made, what needs to be done, yet nothing seems to come, and whether that's resource. I mean, you find it hard to believe that it would be a lack of will to get this sorted, but that's to come in the fullness of time. In the meantime, what are you and your employees doing? Because, you know, it is all hands on deck. When do you expect to return to work? Are you able to operate?
Well, I've probably got a lot of employees watching this hoping that I'm saying not for a while so they can continue working from home, which of course we, in a post-COVID world, do like to do. Although we are equipped for people to work from home and not to work in the office, I'm a firm believer that working in the office environment and kind of feeding off the morale is paramount. However, in this case, a lot of people's laptops were destroyed in this flooding, so people literally cannot work, whether from home or in the office or no. You know, we have been affected, and you know, yesterday and the day before were you know, very serious for us, as was today. But we're hoping, you know, with people working from home and kind of our staff rallying together, we can get back in business ASAP. You know, we insure tradespeople, and we're now ironically having to rely on tradespeople to kind of get us back going. You know, builders and carpenters are already in the office helping us make the clearance, and I'm sure we'll be using a lot more of them in the future.
Yeah, and presumably relying on your insurance company. As you said, you insure tradespeople. You're not in this kind of insurance, but presumably you have got business owners insurance that includes, you know, building and contents. And, you know, you do talk to a lot of people after these kind of events, and that can be a long and laboured process to get anywhere, their insurance company. Interesting, you know, you're going from one insurance company to your own. How's that process working?
Well, we're learning a lot about the claims process, about what it's like to be on the receiving end of something like this. So it's ironic, really. I'm sure not a lot of people are going to be, you know, feeling that sorry for us as an insurance firm. But what I will say is it will only help us in the future understand the importance of the products and services that we provide. And anybody who has to, unfortunately, go through a calamity such as this, you know, regardless of whether you're a tradesperson, a business owner, or anybody else, making a claim on your insurance is so important. And all we can do is use this to better our business and hopefully others in the future.
OK, listen, Troy, good luck. Troy Stevens there, business owner, local insurance company whose offices are pretty much underwater at the moment. Look, we wish you the best of luck with the recovery. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News. Troy Stevens there. In other news today, the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, has hit back at Elon Musk in this deepening war of words over grooming gangs in the UK. She told Sky News she has more important things to think about. The world's richest man had accused her of being a rape genocide apologist, something she says is ridiculous after dedicating her working life to child exploitation, the prevention of. Our political correspondent Liz Bates has this report.
Should there be a national inquiry, Minister?
Arriving for the first cabinet meeting of the new year.
Should there be a national inquiry into grooming gangs, Foreign Secretary?
Sir Keir Starmer's top team confronted with a scandal decades in the making. Child sexual exploitation by grooming gangs.
Is Elon Musk dangerous?
And all because of this man, billionaire Trump ally Elon Musk, who blamed years of inaction on the Prime Minister and called Home Office Minister Jess Phillips a rape genocide apologist. Today, she responded.
It's a ridiculous statement. It's completely and utterly untrue. I've had men say worse things about me over the years, but what it makes me feel, when, you know, in the cold light of day, after you sort of dealt with how ridiculous it is and then the effect it's going to have on whether it's the next week of your life or how much of your life, you go back to, you can't be silenced by these people because you've got a job to do. Just, you know, crack on with us, getting to Mars. I have no... Elon Musk is going to Elon Musk. I've got bigger and more important things to be thinking about.
The Conservatives, accused of jumping on the Musk bandwagon, were adamant they have long supported a new grooming gang inquiry.
I know the media is obsessed by Elon Musk's tweets. I'm not interested in that.
So why weren't you shouting about this before Christmas?
I was. I called for, last year, full life sentences for perpetrators.
You didn't call for a full inquiry because your government had carried one out, which only now you're saying
I wasn't interested in this. I was. My record speaks for itself.
It's a Westminster row that has its origins 200 miles north in the Manchester town of Oldham. Councillors here, including independent Brian Hoban, have repeatedly called for a public inquiry. They were refused by the last Conservative government and again by Jess Phillips last year. He says survivors must come before politics.
There's something with the timing that doesn't sit right with me. I'm glad it's top of the agenda at the moment, but there's something that it makes me feel as though it's being politicised, and that's not for the good of the survivors.
But there's more party politics to come, with the Conservatives set to force a vote tomorrow in the Commons, leaving places like Oldham in the midst of a political standoff with no end in sight. Liz Bates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, you can find that full interview with Jess Phillips and Beth Rigby on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, which is out later this week. Well, earlier today, I spoke to Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion. She was a core participant in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which was published back in 2022. I started by asking Sarah what has changed since the last public inquiry into grooming gangs.
I mean, the biggest change is that people now recognise it as a crime. And I would hope if someone walked into a police station to report it, they will be taken seriously. Sadly, I can say 10 years ago that wouldn't have been the case, and I wouldn't be able to give any reassurances around that. I think also the CPS have become a lot better at understanding the crime and prosecuting. I'm in a slightly, I'm in a very luxurious position in that I actually managed to get the National Crime Agency to open a whole operation just around Rotherham. So the victims and survivors in my area that are engaging with the National Crime Agency get a lot of support. They get a lot of time invested in them, so they can take as long as they want to come forward. And that's a real luxury. I have to say, in most places that you go to, you wouldn't get such a gold standard service, may I put it like that. I think also the frustration is that we do now know, because there's been a number of inquiries, what needs to change, both to get the support to the victims and survivors, but also to get the prosecutions, and also crucially to prevent it happening in the first place. Whilst we know, literally in black and white, they don't really seem to have been implemented. And what I worry about now is that we end up having another inquiry, spend another £200 million, and we get the exact recommendations a third time, and the victims and survivors don't get any help, and the perpetrators are still roaming the streets.
Yeah, Sarah, in your opinion, this call for another national inquiry, a national statutory public inquiry, something focused solely on grooming gangs, something that has teeth that would legally require those summoned to give evidence. Is that a necessary and effective next step? Or are the recommendations already there? As you said, we know what the problem is. More people are coming forward. Recommendations have been put forward from another national inquiry and various local inquiries and reports as well.
I completely understand why people want to have a national inquiry, because they want to get this sordid business out. I mean, evil lives in dark corners, so I get why they want to get it out and exposed. What I will say is I spent 2 years doing the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse when they did a specific strand that was just on organised groups. So we call them grooming gangs, but organised groups. So for 2 years, we had lawyers, we had lots of victims and survivors. We had people that were frontline staff feeding into that inquiry strand. I also spent, I can't remember how long, 9 months doing a Home Office inquiry again into, if I call them grooming gangs, I think the title was Organised Networks Child Abuse. So a lot of time, a lot of resources has already been spent. We do know what the problem is. We just haven't implemented it. So what I would say is that a national inquiry has been done. We know what the problem is. I do think there's a lot of validity to have local inquiries. And that, for me, is about holding the authorities to account and making sure that they are actually implementing both victim and survivor support, early intervention and prosecutions in the right way. And that's worked really well. I mean, Rotherham, we had one. It's actually by Alexis J. I also know there's been one in Telford that the council ran. So I think it's right that Oldham Council do hold one. What I don't want to see is that we have these big national ones, because to be perfectly blunt about it, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse took 7 years, cost £186 million, and here I have the list of 20 recommendations, and none of them have been implemented.
But I guess my key question is, if those recommendations are there, why aren't they being implemented?
It's very simple, because they're cross-government solutions. So it's things like, I mean, the recommendations, also, let me be clear, are not just about child sexual exploitation. They're not just about grooming gangs. They're about preventing child abuse. So the scale of child abuse in this country is epidemic. I mean, it's disgusting and despicable. And we have to deal with it as a national crisis. And these 20 recommendations are a way to do that. So that's about cultural change as much as it is about getting realistic data. It's about having a children's minister who is there just for child protection, similar to the health and safety executive, that kind of level. It's about getting organisations to work together. So there's a whole raft of things, but the problem is they cross different departments. So no one department has got ownership. So the Home Secretary came forward with 3 recommendations this week, and they're the 3 that she can do with her department. We've got an education bill coming through tomorrow, and I'm going to be arguing how the Education Minister can grasp about 6 of these recommendations. But other ones fall under justice, for example. Others fall under housing. Others fall under health. So what we need, basically, if people want to be cross and call for something, call for the government to implement all 20 of these and make sure they actually have a timescale, and most importantly, the resources behind them. That's how we both prevent child abuse, we support survivors, and we prosecute and convict paedophiles.
Meanwhile, Sarah, is this still going on in Rotherham?
Yes. I mean, I would say, I'll paraphrase what a former chief police officer said to me. You'd be pretty stupid to do this particular model of grooming in Rotherham. What is happening, though, is most of the child sexual exploitation, and particularly from gangs, is in 2 sources. One, it's online, and paedophiles can access children much, much quicker in much greater numbers online, and it's a much shorter process for them to actually get to the point of sexually abusing a child, but also peer on peer. And that is a real growing area of group abuse, which is something that we absolutely have to make sure is curtailed rapidly. And again, is something that would fall within the Education Department, so something that I'll be raising in Parliament tomorrow with them.
Sarah Champion, Labour MP, speaking to me a little earlier today. Now, Meta is scrapping its third-party fact-checking service on Facebook and Instagram, instead replacing it with a community note system similar to the one used by X. The company's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, says the move will help promote freedom of expression and stop harmless content from being taken down. It comes as the UFC boss, Dana White, a friend of President-elect Donald Trump, has also joined Meta's board of directors. So let's bring in our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, who joins me now. What effect are these changes going to have?
Well, we don't quite know yet. I think it's fair to say, speak to digital democracy activists, people concerned about free speech, and certainly some of the groups that might be affected, LGBT community and others, because Facebook said it's going to remove the content moderation for those areas. It's really worrying. It's very concerning. But it's exactly the sort of thing that MAGA Republicans wanted to hear. Because remember, this is the fact-checking, these third-party content moderators that Facebook brought in. That was largely in response to just suggestion as Facebook grew more and more powerful, people were using it, particularly during political periods. It was leading to biases, and there were unregulated comments and statements being made. We need to regulate this environment. Fact checkers were brought in. In fact, I think Facebook claimed it's the largest employer of fact checkers around the world, ensuring that content is accurate. But that was causing real ire amongst Republicans, particularly during the 2020 election campaign. Donald Trump accused Mark Zuckerberg of using Facebook to effectively campaign against him. There was a real enmity between them. Zuckerberg, keen to make friends in Washington now. This is largely seen as an attempt to try and curry favour with the incoming president. He needs that friendship as well, given the sorts of things coming towards his company. And he pretty much, when he announced these rule changes earlier, pretty much said that himself. This is what he had to say.
The problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. We've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Tom, it's interesting. Today, two big stories with connections that lead back to the president-elect, Donald Trump. This change at Meta, of which you've spoken about, the connection to Donald Trump, and Elon Musk talking about UK grooming gangs. Of course, Elon Musk going to be a key advisor in the new Trump administration. Do you think this is an example of how the Donald Trump effect, it's not until January the 20th that he's actually inaugurated, but the ripple effect won't just be felt across the United States, but worldwide?
I think that's certainly true. And
in unexpected areas as well.
I don't think anyone ever really disputed, when it comes down to free speech, the idea that you should be able to control people's opinions online. But what's key about this was about facts. This is about things that are either true or not. And that is quite a worrying development, especially when professional fact-checking groups and things like that see, and this is partly why they attract so much ire from the MAGA movement, a lot of those facts tend to be repeated in those echo chambers, that misinformation in those echo chambers, although it's important to say there was a lot of it beginning to arise from more Liberal and Democrat voters during the last election. So that is a really concerning trend. It's important to say at the moment, though, and partly because of legislation here in the UK, the Online Safety Act and a similar one in the EU, third-party fact-checkers will still be used by Meta in the UK and Europe for the time being, at least. They've said that this just applies to America, but it is an international platform. So are they going to then have to check US content that hasn't been moderated over here? That will be an interesting development to see how that works out.
Next challenge for them.
But it certainly does seem to be a very big shift amongst two social media companies away from some kind of fact-based checking that will now be left up to users of those sites. Important also to say illegal content, things like terrorism, criminal activity, child sexual abuse, that still will be moderated by systems within Meta, and users can report them to the companies as well. So they haven't ignored that.
OK, Tom, thank you. Tom Clark, our Science and Technology editor there, with the update on the changes at Meta. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll be hearing from the sister of one of two British hikers missing in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. And the government is cracking down on sexually explicit deepfake images, but do their plans go far enough to tackle the problem? And why are we seeing a rise in humpback whale sightings off the British coast? We'll be hearing from a wildlife filmmaker a little later.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
People who create sexually explicit deepfake images, pictures of real people which are then created or edited using AI, could now be prosecuted under a package of new laws. Creating deepfakes of children is already a criminal offence, but these plans would see an expansion of the existing law to include those who make these hyper-realistic images of people over the age of 18. Earlier, I spoke to reality TV star and campaigner Sarah-Jane Mee. Last year, she discovered that somebody had used AI to turn a photograph of her into an explicit deepfake nude that was being shared online. I started by asking Sarah-Jane what it was like when she saw that picture for the first time.
Somebody sent me a message and basically said there's an explicit image of you on the internet. Have you seen it? I just said it can't be correct because I haven't taken any explicit images of myself. They sent through the link as I asked them to, and I followed it through and opened it, and to my horror there was me stood there in the nude, but wasn't me. So it was, you know, my head, my torso, my arms and my legs, but it had superimposed body parts. Now, I had the original image, which was an underwear campaign image. And it was those parts that had been AI generated and removed. So instantly, in a bit of a panic, I took to social media and spoke out on it, said what I'd found, posted the two images side by side so people could see, you know, the likeness, but obviously, you know, blurred out the private area. And it was then that I realised it was a major issue because the messages that I received, I was inundated. That was kind of my first encounter with realising a major problem with the image-based abuse and AI. But a lot of people have been suffering for a while with it. I was told about a 14-year-old schoolgirl who actually took her life because it was used as a bullying tactic and sent around school. And that was just horrifying. And obviously being a mum myself, I realised that there was a real problem. And a lot of people said, you know, please do something about this, use your platform to help. And that is what I intended to do.
Obviously, you called it out on social media and said this isn't real and let everyone know. Did you take it to the police and what was their reaction? What were the steps that followed? Because your image was eventually taken down.
Yes, so I did take it to the police and that was where it was even more disheartening to me personally than finding the image, was that I was kind of helpless. There wasn't really anything that could be done about it. They said that it was hosted on a global platform, which they didn't have the jurisdiction to, you know, instruct that platform to take it down. And I was really shocked by that. They basically just said the best that, you know, we can do is to email the site personally, ask them to take it down. So I did so, my management did so. There was a really nice lady in the police force that said that she would do so. So it was kind of coming at the site from all angles to take it down. They did so, but the issue was that was just because they decided to do that and they decided to respond. But if they didn't, as I said to the police, what if we don't get a response, then what happens? And they was like, well, we don't really know. It's not really, you know, it's a bit of a grey area. They just kept saying it's a bit of a grey area and there's not really anything that we can do about it. And I think that's what was the most disappointing, that, you know, there was no way of them being able to track IP addresses, even though people had to create profiles on this site to be able to do this to people's pictures. And then there was advertisements for apps for people to download so that they could access it on their mobile phones. It was shocking, really.
Yeah, you don't need any expertise to be able to do this. As you said, you can just download an app. Anyone can create these realistic images now.
Yeah.
And ruin lives. I mean, the Victims Minister, Alex Davis-Jones, says 1 in 3 women are subjected to online abuse. Deepfake's becoming a growing part of that. What do you make of the new proposals from the government? This is as part of their pledge to halve violence against women and girls within the next decade. Talk to me about what you make of the information they've put out there so far and whether it will be enough, because as you've just said, it is a really complicated issue, not just to get the images taken down, but to find those responsible for it.
Yeah, precisely. I think that's what it needs to cover, you know, when this is, you know, implemented. We don't know at the moment the fine details of, you know, the sentences they're going to receive or what's going to happen, but there really needs to be the very own image-based abuse law, which is what I've campaigned with Glamour. That is what needs to be put in place, because it's not just, you know, a perpetrator or somebody that's created this image. There's a whole umbrella that everybody needs to work together with the government to, you know, make sure that this is tackled head-on and seriously, and that there's no loopholes within, you know, this. They can't just be somebody saying, oh, well, you're only going to be prosecuted if you can prove that it was intent to cause harm. That's not the case. It needs to be just, there's no consent there, and that's what it needs to be. Not, you know, somebody will be saying then, oh, it was just a joke, or it was just a bit of fun. And that's not the case.
Yeah, you make a really good point there. Glamour, you mentioned, of course, Glamour magazine, the women's magazine, who are doing a lot of work in this area. The organisation End Violence Against Women and Girls picked up on something you just said there. They said, we await confirmation that any new law criminalising the creation of sexually explicit deepfakes will be based on consent rather than the perpetrator's intent. It will cover solicitation of image creation as well as the creation itself and be listed as a priority offence in the Online Safety Act. This law needs to have teeth to work, doesn't it, basically?
It does,
and it needs to come in soon, because there is a danger of this being normalised. These apps are readily available now for people to download so that anyone can do it. You don't need any real expertise. So there's an urgency here, isn't there? And there's no time frame being given by the government. That's the next bit of pressure you want to put on, right?
Yeah, because, again, I couldn't get any justice for it, and I'm hoping that, you know, moving forward, people can get that justice for it. It's not a nice position to be in, and I just hope that it is dealt with quickly, because, you know, like I said, I started campaigning pretty much straight away, and that was last January. And we've only now just got, you know, this announcement yesterday. But again, how long is this going to take for it to be implemented? You know, what is it going to look like on the legislation? Is there going to be loopholes? Do we have to put more work in? Is there more that needs to be done? Which probably yes. But I think at the moment I'm just grateful that it's been noticed, and a lot of hard work from not just me, but, you know, many people around me. We're finally getting somewhere.
I just want to bring you an update on a developing story this evening. This is an incident that happened earlier on today. A 14-year-old boy stabbed to death on a bus in south-east London. Police say the teenager was treated at the scene in Woolwich but died shortly after paramedics arrived. No arrests have been made. A police cordon remains in place tonight.
Our thoughts at the time are with the victim's family and friends. This is a horrendous crime, and I can't imagine what they must be going through right now. No arrests have been made at this early stage, but we are working at pace to identify and arrest those involved, and police cordons and road closures will remain in place while we continue to carry out inquiries. I know this will be a worrying time for everyone here in Woolwich, and all the more so given the very young age of the victim. The community can expect to see an enhanced police presence around the scene and the surrounding area.
Yeah, police appealing for witnesses who were on the 472 bus in Woolwich earlier on today. Still to come here on the UK tonight, we'll be hearing from the sister of one of 2 British hikers missing in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. That's on the way. A major search and rescue operation is underway in northern Italy for two British men who have gone missing. 35-year-old Samuel Harris and 36-year-old Aziz Ziriat, both from London, were hiking in the Dolomites in the Trentino region of Italy. They were last heard from on the 1st of January and didn't check in for their flight home yesterday. Earlier, I spoke to Aziz's sister Miriam, and I started by asking her when she last heard from Aziz and his friend Sam.
We haven't had any contact from them since the 1st of January, but we're really concerned, I guess, once they missed their connecting flight from Verona. They were supposed to land home yesterday. And after contacting the airlines, we realised that they didn't board their flights. So we've been sort of really concerned in the last 24 hours since they haven't returned home.
Talk to me about the efforts that are ongoing to locate them.
Yeah, so the Alpine Rescue Team and local police and emergency services have been involved. It sounds like they've really done an incredible effort today at trying to locate them. But what I've been told is that the weather conditions are really not great in the location that they're at. So we understand their last location. They shared with us on the 1st of January. So we have an idea of where they were based at a sort of cabin or a refuge in the area of the Dolomites that they were hiking, but we haven't since had any more information. So the search has started there, but because there's been a lot of snowfall, I've been told, and that there's a lot of fog, so that they haven't been able to kind of, I think a couple of helicopters have gone out today, but they haven't been able to land or actually go into any of the two of the specific cabins or refuges that they hope that Aziz and Sam are located at. So we're still sort of waiting on news, and the next steps is that tomorrow morning, once it's daylight again, hoping that the weather permits the kind of the helicopter searches to go out and explore these cabins.
Yeah, you have a starting point for the search, as you said the last time you heard from them on New Year's Day. You know where they were then. Did Aziz share his route? They are experienced hikers. They do like to go off grid, not communicate with people. But would they have shared the route so the rescuers know what trail to follow?
So we understand that they were using that cabin as a base, and they were going to sort of explore some of the higher peaks up to sort of 2,500, 3,000 metres above sea level. So we understand that they were sort of exploring around that area. But we don't know the exact route. We have been able to access Aziz's email, and through that we've been able to locate on the 1st of January the route that they did actually track across the mountains. So that's been shared with the police, and that's given them a sort of more precise location to search for. So that's where we sort of narrowed it down to these possible kind of refuge sites that they hope to be able to access tomorrow morning.
Yeah, Miriam, as I said, you're right in the thick of all of this, and to be sitting here in the UK, knowing that your brother's missing in Italy, you're trying to do all you can. And I know that the Metropolitan Police have said that while this is out of their jurisdiction, they're working closely with the National Crime Agency, Interpol, and the local mountain rescue teams in the region to provide their support and any additional resources. And I understand that you've got a meeting with them this evening. What is it that you hope you can give them that will help?
Just any information that I have. We've all been sharing kind of screenshots of our last contact with both Aziz and Sam, any photos that they shared with us, any sort of mountains or sort of scenic shots that might help us identify a more specific location for them. So yeah, and just hoping to kind of share what I know and keep them in the loop so that they can liaise with the local authorities in Italy and just really try and all we can to sort of just really desperate to get some news on their whereabouts and their sort of safety as soon as possible.
Miriam Ziriat, sister of Aziz, who is missing in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy, along with his friend Sam. We'll keep you up to date on that story as and when we get more information here on Sky News. Still to come on the UK Tonight, we'll take a look at why we're seeing more and more humpback whales off the south coast. And in sport, Newcastle lead Arsenal 1-0 in the League Cup semi-final first leg. We'll bring you the details.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over $50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free, wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Hello, welcome back. Coming up, why humpback whales are popping up more and more off the British coast. But first, Teddy is here with a sport. And the first picture of a new relationship out there in the open. There it is, Andy Murray as Novak Djokovic's new coach. This is ahead of the Australian Open. I mean, it's quite the image on both of them on the same side of the net than used to being on the opposite sides of the net. And the big question is, I guess, what can Andy Murray add to Novak Djokovic? He's already, you know, the greatest
24-time Grand Slam winner, yeah. And Andy Murray's got his 3 slams, but as you say, Djokovic...
Not saying that Andy Murray hasn't got anything to offer, you understand.
He's very good. Well, looks like they're in his tracksuit bottoms and maybe he's talking him through the backhand. But I think maybe it's more than that. It's knowledge of on the court, both Djokovic and his opponents. What's really interesting here is they're 7 days apart in terms of birthdays. So they were with each other all the way through boys' tennis, all the way through international men's tennis, vying for that #1. Yes, we know that Djokovic beat Murray in the final in Australia 4 times. Murray did get the better of him at 2013 in Wimbledon, 2012 in US Open. So he knows Djokovic's strengths and weaknesses, but also beyond that, he also, coming 6 months out of the action himself, knows the opponents. And Djokovic hasn't won a slam. He won his 24th at the US Open in the autumn of 2023, so nearly 18 months ago. No one at his age has ever won a Grand Slam in men's tennis. Ken Rosewall was 37 and 2 months. Djokovic is 37 and 8 months now. But you just wonder if maybe Murray can steer him past the likes of Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. Alcaraz, 21, won 2 slams last year. Yannick Sinner, the Italian, won 2 slams, is 23. But maybe it's just that wisdom. Maybe having someone with him as well. He's talked about the post-traumatic stress he still gets in Melbourne after being deported 3 years ago. So it's nice to see two great rivals and former foes, isn't it, teaming up?
Yeah, let's see what they can do. We won't have long to wait, will we?
No, draws on Thursday, so we'll find out who Novak Djokovic plays first. Hopefully it's favourable for him and see if he gets another run, trying to add to his 10 titles in Melbourne. We'll update you momentarily on the football, because big game between Arsenal and Newcastle tonight in the League Cup semi-final.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I'm striving to find out how our Games Academy system works. I've heard from the very best managers.
20 years ago,
If you had talent, you could be at the top, but now is not enough.
I've heard from the very best players.
You get your first contract when you're 8, 9. Year on year, you're fighting for a contract.
I've heard from those who've had their dreams shattered.
I'm so out of love with it, I don't want to be here.
Coming up in this episode, I'll find out exactly how the system works.
The 2 biggest periods of success in Manchester United's history have been driven by young academy players.
The way we do things may be slightly different, predominantly because we've been doing it longer than anyone else. Our youth program's 90 years old, and we're trying to build a program that sees the boys reach their full potential. Ultimately, you know, the utopia is we want to support players to go and play in our first team, and we've been brilliant at that over the years.
The relationship that the academy have with the first team, with the manager, with the director of football, chief executive, how close is that, Nick?
Youth development is the centre of this football club because of Matt Busby, because of Sir Alex, because of Munich, because of the Champions Leagues that we won. The youth sat at the heart of it. It's a way of life.
The 2 biggest periods of success in Manchester United's history have been...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, we like to try and leave you with something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight. And in the last few days, humpback whales has been spotted off the south coast. A Facebook group that I'm involved in got very excited as one was spotted near Hastings in Sussex. They've also been seen off the Cornish coast as well in recent days. And these kind of sightings in the UK are becoming more frequent. Why is that? Well, let's speak to wildlife and documentary filmmaker Dan Abbott, who joins me now, who was filming that whale we just saw there in Newquay a few days ago. Dan, like I said, I spotted this on Facebook in a Hastings group, and I thought it was a bit of a hoax. And I was just talking to people. They said, oh, yeah, it's been spotted in... There's one been spotted in Newquay and in various places around the south coast. So why the sudden influx of sightings?
I wouldn't say it's sudden. I mean, seeing them around Cornwall last year was incredible. There was loads and loads of sightings that lasted all through the winter. And seeing humpbacks around the UK isn't new, but there does seem to be more individuals that are coming into the coastlines in recent years. And I think there could be many, many reasons for it. Global warming is obviously going to be one, but actually I think sometimes it's more simple than that, and animals go where their food is. And with the whale that I filmed last week, there was loads of gannets feeding, dolphins feeding as well. And so there's clearly a lot of food around, and it's natural just for these animals to want to be where their food is. Yeah, so just looking at some of that incredible drone footage that you took, I suppose people are going to want to see whales because you do think of something you do, I don't know, in Australia or something. It's seen as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see a whale on these, exotic trips that, if people are lucky enough to take them. But the thought of being able to see them off the coast of Britain is going to excite a lot of people. So I suppose the key question is, if people do want to whale watch, how do you know where to find them? And importantly, how do you do it safely for you and them? Yeah, I mean, it is pretty exhilarating seeing an animal like a humpback, and all these images that you're seeing here, they're all really close to shore. In fact, you can see where the waves are breaking. So they're not far offshore. Anyone with a pair of binoculars or even without has a really good chance of seeing them, especially as we now move more into the winter season. And actually, I would say as well, watching them from the cliffs is really amazing because you're not having any disturbance on the animal. You're just seeing it doing its thing. Where there can be issues is if you're chasing them on boats or also using drones, which is, of course, how I got my footage. I've been filming wildlife using drones for a long, long time and sort of understands the limits, I suppose, whereas not to try and disturb the animals. But it's really, really important not to have any disturbance on these animals that are being seen more and more around our coastlines. Yeah, really good advice there, Dan. Thank you so much. I know a good spot in Hastings, Rock-a-Nor, I think would be a good spot to go and try and see a whale from. Maybe we'll do that this weekend with the family. What an incredible opportunity for people, what an incredible experience for you as well. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the UK Tonight. That's all from us. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Up next, well, it's The World with Yalda.